Welcome back to the deep dive, where we crack open dense, often esoteric source material and turn those insights into surprising and highly actionable knowledge, all custom tailored for you. Pull up a chair. Tonight, we are going deep, deep into a slice of history from a very personal, very warm evening. We're analyzing Session 74 of the Early Sessions, Book 2 of the famous Seth Material. The recording date is July 27th, 1964. And if you know anything about the context of these sessions, you know those were hot, sometimes humid nights in Elmira, New York.
Oh, yeah.
And that intense, charged atmosphere, it often lends itself to incredibly sharp psychological revelations.
It really does.
Yeah.
Our mission tonight, for anyone listening and, navigating their own professional life, is to extract the universal truth from this highly intimate session. We're going to be dissecting the mechanism by which deeply buried, decades-old childhood trauma,
Specifically, a profound fear of authority resurfaces and just collides with contemporary professional insecurity. And it creates spectacular, frustrating, and utterly unnecessary workplace drama. We're looking for the shortcuts.
the shortcuts, yeah.
The deceptively simple mental and physical disciplines offered here to just dismantle those conditioned panic reflexes.
It's the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed about your own internal operating system. And this fascinating realization that the fight you think you're having with your boss over, I don't know, a misplaced semicolon,
Right.
it's actually a phantom fight with a figure from your past. We're going to discuss defensive porcupines, artistic spelling rebellion, and the bizarre difficulty of simply inviting someone out for a drink. But first, we do need to make our required declaration. This deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We strongly believe that this depth of insight into personal and collective psychology should be accessible widely, and we thank you for listening. And we absolutely encourage you, the listener, to explore the source material for yourself. We're analyzing Session 74 of the Seth Material, channeled by Jane Roberts and recorded by Robert F. Butts. This material it's vast and rich.
It is.
We credit the Seth Material and the publisher, New Awareness Network, for maintaining and distributing this critical work. You can study these books and visit their website and bookstore at sethcenter.com/the-early sessions. There is truly a lifetime of learning waiting for you there.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the session, despite dealing with some pretty complex psychological warfare in the workplace, it starts on the most grounded note possible: physical and mental training.
Right out of the gate.
It immediately pivots to advice concerning a specific set of back exercises. I always appreciate when, these deep metaphysical texts prescribe something as mundane as good posture or light calisthenics.
It speaks to the holistic view, doesn't it, that's inherent in this material. The inner psychological state and the physical body are. They're inseparable components of the working unit. The advice immediately recommends re-engaging with those exercises for the individual known as Ruburt or Jane.
And the source is crystal clear on this. There are two major intertwined benefits from this simple physical routine.
Yes, and the first benefit, it sounds like instant stress relief, something we could all use on a hot, humid night in July. It's just quietude and relaxation.
Exactly. Physical discomfort, muscle tension, it all just feeds that anxiety loop.
Hmm.
So addressing the body immediately calms the whole system.
But the second benefit is really the core discipline we need to focus on. A certain training in concentration is achieved. The physical movement demands focus. You can't just go through the motions while your mind is like running wild on your worries about the gallery director.
No, you
You
can't.
have to consciously guide the physical process, linking mind and body.
That makes perfect sense. It's forcing the mind to stop the obsessive looping of anxiety by giving it an immediate, physical, non-threatening task to focus on. But why the big emphasis on conditioning here?
Because the entire need for these conditioning exercises, it ties directly back to a historical health issue, Rubert's former thyroid condition. The text notes that the biological disorder itself had cleared up completely.
Right.
However, the psychological and behavioral patterns that went along with the hyperactive thyroid, the residual anxiety, the jumpiness, the fast, frightened responses, they had become merely habit.
So the trigger is gone, but the gunpowder is still packed and ready to ignite at the slightest spark of stress.
Precisely. That conditioned response now appears only occasionally in times of stress, but it represents this failure mode that prevents productive action. So if the underlying cause is no longer biological but purely habitual, then the cure has to be behavioral conditioning. The training is the intentional overwrite of that psychological software.
That's a fascinating insight for anyone dealing with anxiety. Once the original trauma or physical cause is resolved, you're often left battling a ghost, a habit of panic that your body remembers, even if your rational mind knows better.
And this is the mission statement of the discipline. The daily, conscious use of these exercises and the mental focus they demand is intended to develop control. The ultimate goal, and this is a phrase worth highlighting, is for the system to change entirely, until eventually relaxation will be the built-in conditioned reflex that panic used to be.
A default setting for peace, that concept is just. It's profoundly powerful. It means you've inverted the whole mechanism of reaction. When a stressful trigger arrives, your system doesn't immediately default to defensive porcupine mode.
Right.
It defaults to a stable, calm base from which you can choose an appropriate, measured response.
And it has to be measured. The source is very careful to add a necessary caveat for those who fear that discipline means becoming inert or, passive.
A doormat.
Yeah, exactly. The source specifically clarifies, I do not mean, of course, that he will automatically turn into a jellyfish when a good fight may be called for. This is not about passive acceptance. It's about intentional, masterful control.
It's about being able to engage fully when necessary, rather than being dragged into a reactive, disorganized fight. If you don't have that internal discipline, your energy is scattered, your focus is fragmented, and your response is always just a knee-jerk defense.
And the material connects this discipline directly to broader life success, particularly Ruburt's primary work as a writer. The source notes that if Ruburt had sat down to plan a process that would maximize his writing abilities while preventing him from scattering those abilities, he couldn't have chosen a better path than the one he was currently on.
So it's the framework.
It is. It's the framework for using full intuition with discipline and control.
How does that internal peace tangibly improve the quality of the work, though? Why is it deeper and of greater import?
Well, think of it this way. Creative work requires the sustained application of focused energy. When Ruburt is operating under the panic reflex, massive amounts of mental and physical energy are shunted into defensive behavior, anxious looping, arguing with the director, all energy that should be going into creative output. This scattering of abilities leads to shallower work done in fits and starts, or, work that's easily dismissed because the writer is just too exhausted or distracted to fully embody the material.
So the back exercises aren't just for posture. They are literally conserving the energy that would otherwise be wasted on anxiety.
Absolutely. The promise is direct. Because of this routine, a daily schedule that includes contemplation and a temporary relaxation and slowing down of bodily process, he will live longer, yes, but far more importantly for his mission, his work will be deeper and of greater import.
Wow.
The internal architecture of calm directly determines the weight and lasting impact of the external output. It's an incredibly high-yield investment.
It's a crucial realization for anyone struggling with creative blocks or professional burnout. Your most critical work starts not with strategy or ambition, but with the intentional, non-negotiable daily management of your own nervous system. That foundation of calm. It's the launch pad for all significant endeavors. Now that we've established the foundation of calm that was prescribed, let's apply that toolkit to the specific drama that required it. The session immediately pivots to a very specific, grounded example. Ruburt's explosive panic reactions from the previous week at the gallery where he works.
Yeah.
What was the core psychological mechanism at play here?
This is where the material executes just a precise, brilliant piece of psychoanalysis, the panic reaction. It wasn't about the gallery job itself. It was triggered because, and this is the key, he fears authority.
And this fear isn't just a weakness, it's a double-edged sword, as you mentioned earlier. This fear of authority is simultaneously the reason for many of his problems, yet it's also one of the reasons for his admirable independence of mind and spirit.
Exactly. The root of the problem, the terror, is also the engine of his powerful intellectual and spiritual autonomy. The independence is a compensation mechanism, a way of proving he doesn't need external validation.
But when that compensation fails,
the stress is overwhelming because the reflex is rooted in profound childhood trauma. To understand the depth of the reaction, we have to look at the chilling details that establish this conditioned reflex.
the source material spares no detail when describing the relationship with the mother, who for the child represented the ultimate yet totally unstable authority. She's described as frightening, threatening, sometimes cruel and capricious. That instability is key, isn't it?
It creates a reality that you just can't trust. And the specific threats the mother made are, Well, they're terrifyingly illustrative of the internal chaos the child experienced. Imagine a child whose primary caregiver, though physically disabled, makes statements that the child takes literally.
Sinister, irrational threats.
Yes, the mother, though a cripple, would threaten that she could walk at night, would turn on the gas jets, and so forth.
Oh, that is chilling. The authority figure is not just arbitrary, but potentially monstrous and unpredictable. A physical disability that should ensure safety is leveraged as a terrifying secret power. It's a horror movie premise that guarantees sleepless nights.
Absolutely. That kind of emotional environment, where the very foundation of safety is laced with malice and instability, it would create an immediate lifelong panic response.
Hmm.
The text confirms that the child was almost paralyzed with terror.
Wow.
This trauma directly contributed to the thyroid condition we just discussed, the physical system mirroring the emotional chaos, and it instilled those fast, frightened responses that were desperate defense mechanisms. The subconscious learned a rule. Authority equals existential threat. Defend immediately.
So, decades later, Ruburt is an adult working a part-time job, and the new director walks in. How does this history manifest itself?
The director becomes the perfect, unfortunate proxy. The text notes he is a figure of authority, and insists, in fact, upon being considered in such a light. Even if the director isn't actively malicious, his insistence on hierarchy and protocol is enough to activate that old, deeply wired neural pathway of terror.
And the result is the brilliant porcupine analogy. It's not a meltdown. It's a physical and emotional defense system.
The porcupine perfectly captures the state of being trapped and highly aggressive at the same time. Ruburt feels trapped, unable to flee the professional situation, and immediately becomes prickling all over, eyes glaring, an attitude more prickly than a porcupine's quills.
It's the inner child.
It's the desperate attempt by the terrified inner child to make himself untouchable, aggressive, and entirely resistant to control. It's a defense mechanism designed for survival against the crippling, gaff-jet-turning authority figure.
Yet, the session adds this layer of adult cognitive rationalization to the whole porcupine reaction. The fact that Ruburt considered the man an ass, as the source puts it, actually provided a strange kind of psychological assistance.
That's the adult ego jumping in to justify the conditioned reflex. By mentally dismissing the director as an ass, Ruburt wasn't just panicking, he was deploying justified disdain toward an unworthy target. This self-rationalization gave him intellectual permission to be defiant and deploy the defensive mechanism.
So it turns raw fear into righteous anger.
Which is often easier to handle even if it makes for terrible professional relations.
It's a crucial insight for us today. I mean, how often do we project incompetence onto a figure of authority simply to justify our own disproportionate conditioned response to them? We don't say, I am paralyzed by an old fear. We say, my boss is an idiot, and therefore I must be rude to preserve my dignity.
It allows the defense mechanism to feel heroic rather than just reactive. The disagreement is never really about the art of the job. It's about a shadowy figure from the past threatening to paralyze you. Recognizing that distinction is the first step towards self-control, which is exactly what the back exercises are designed to enable. And if we shift focus to the immediate mechanics of the workplace friction, particularly after the session break, we see how this core fear of authority translates into these highly specific, almost absurd behaviors. The core problem, according to the source, is the trap of interpretation.
Explain that trap. It sounds like a minefield where every single interaction is inherently dangerous.
It is. Ruburt interprets everything between himself and the director solely in terms of implied superiority or inferiority. Every word, every glance, every request of correction, it all immediately gets scored on this competitive zero-sum scale.
If the director wins.
If the director wins this small interaction, Ruburt feels inferior, which in his subconscious means he's right back in the position of the terrified child.
That pressure leads to such extreme defensiveness that he can't even afford a moment of pleasantness. He fears a simple smile will be misinterpreted.
Absolutely. The source notes that if he smiles, he fears it'll be taken as apple polishing, which inherently implies inferiority on the part of the apple polisher. The goal is to assert autonomy, even if it damages the relationship.
So what does he do?
So, to ensure no such impression is given, he swings aggressively to the opposite extreme, resorting to sarcasm and, upon a few occasions, downright rudeness. This is a classic overcorrection, a desperate, painful performance of superiority designed solely to keep the specter of inferiority at bay.
That is painfully relatable in modern office dynamics, where a simple gesture of professionalism can be interpreted as subservience. But nothing highlights this dynamic better than the highly specific, almost ridiculous point of contention. spelling.
The spelling rebellion. It's a glorious microcosm of the entire conflict. The director, on his own end, is described as simply a stickler for detail. The text explicitly states he does not believe Ruburt is a mental numbskull. Nor is he trying to maliciously rub his nose in misspelled words. The director is just a meticulous, slightly obsessive person who privately can't fathom why an educated person can't spell. He's tried to tread lightly.
So the director is reacting to a technical inaccuracy, but Ruburt interprets that attention to technical detail, that insistence on conventional standards, as a direct structural assault by the force of authority itself.
Precisely. And so he weaponizes the error. The text calls it pure perversity.
Yeah.
Out of pure perversity, Ruburt has refused to learn how to spell. If authority says spell a word one way, Ruburt defiantly spells it another.
That's amazing.
This isn't simple laziness or ignorance. It is an active artistic statement of defiance. It is a rebellion baked right into the medium of his chosen profession.
The irony is so rich, right? He is a writer, a person whose entire career centers on the precise, intentional use of words. Yet he uses his medium to actively defy the rules of that medium.
He chooses words as the basis for his art, specifically to get back at authority. He's communicating original, excellent, sharp, and concisive ideas to the world, but delivering them through a form that constantly, aggressively breaks the accepted rules of the establishment.
Every misspelling is a statement.
Every consistent misspelling is a tiny, silent declaration of independence. It's a way of saying, you can control the form, but you cannot control my genius or my message.
This gives him incredible psychological leverage, but it must create intense friction. For the listener, this connection is critical. We often see professional friction that looks like an issue of competence or compliance, but it's actually a symbolic battleground for autonomy.
And the session provides the ultimate context for why this battleground matters so much.
Really?
The gallery problems to Ruburt's core writing career. The gallery problems are only truly bothersome when the writer's bruised ego is exposed.
What's the ultimate panic bomb here? It's not the director, it's the rejection slip.
Absolutely. The text states the gallery issues only become urgent when Ruburt has not sold any stories or books for a while. When his ego has been bruised because of a rejection slip, that sense of professional validation is it's shattered. He feels like a failure in his primary field.
And he needs to find validation elsewhere.
Or, failing that, external conflict to prove his strength elsewhere.
And this professional disappointment acts as a massive release valve for all this pent-up psychological energy.
It does. The result is a sudden torrent of energy, both constructive and aggressive, that is suddenly let loose where he works. When he feels secure and validated as a writer, he usually couldn't care less about the petty politics of the gallery.
But when he's hurting,
he transforms from an indifferent employee into a belligerent challenger, fighting for a position and authority he doesn't even want.
He's not fighting for practical money either. He's after prestige money. The status of being a recognized, successful writer. If that status is denied by the market, he goes looking for a fight in the gallery to reclaim his perceived superiority.
This is a powerful application moment for anyone listening. Next time you find yourself disproportionately enraged by a bureaucratic or petty work issue, a colleague's slackness, a minor policy change, a formatting error, pause, and ask yourself, where else has my ego been rejected recently? Is this fight truly about this specific minor detail, or is this torrent of aggressive energy escaping because I feel unvalidated in my core purpose? That insight can save you weeks of stress.
We've thoroughly diagnosed Ruburt's side. The childhood trauma, the condition to panic, the bruised ego, the porcupine reflex. But this session is remarkably balanced. It offers a significant insight into the enemy, the gallery director, who's also trapped in his own psychological prison.
That's the fascinating twist here, isn't it? We might initially see the director as simply an antagonist, but the source reveals he is just as psychologically complex and insecure as Ruburt. His compulsion with detail, which is Ruburt's biggest trigger, is actually his primary defense mechanism.
Details are his fence.
They are. The director is extremely insecure, hiding behind compulsive attention to details. He tends to these details, the precise spelling, the adherence to protocol, so they will guard him. The source calls the details the pickets of his fence. And what are they protecting him from?
An inner extravagance, which he fears.
Exactly.
Wow. So we have Ruburt, the rebellious artist who weaponizes misspelling to unleash his creative inner extravagance, clashing violently with a man whose entire professional persona is built to repress his own creative inner extravagance.
It's a collision of repressed and expressed inner chaos.
That's incredible.
The director is terrified of losing control, of his inner impulses escaping, and so rules and details are the protective barrier he erects daily. He desperately needs affirmation to keep those inner impulses controlled and feel validated in his meticulous, fenced-off world.
And what does the giant killer Ruburt, fueled by fear and rejection, do? He responds with sarcasm and insults, proving the director's worst fears, that the fences are failing, that he isn't respected, and that his carefully controlled environment is being mocked.
This perpetual rejection of the type that Rubert is handing out, it doesn't make the director angry, it frightens and confuses him. The source warns this treatment is dangerous because the director could eventually become vindictive if treated this way for too long.
So even though the director has his own faults,
They're glaring faults, but not deadly ones. And the source insists that a bit of kindness wouldn't actually be demeaning to Rubert, even though he feels it would be an act of complete psychological surrender.
this brings us to Seth's highly practical and strategic advice for de-escalation. Rubert should simply hold back the daggers. Just stop the open hostility.
It's the foundational strategic move, acknowledging that Rubert is capable of being pleasant, and that this session's insight, simply understanding the root cause of his own panic, should help him distinguish his real grievances from his projected ones. The goal is to still the frequent angry tirades that were happening at home against the gallery.
But then comes the legendary suggestion, the one that must have caused an intake of breath from Robert and Jane in that hot room. The treasonous invitation.
This is the genius of the advice, because it directly assaults the conditioned response. The source suggests, it would do no harm to invite the man for a drink in your home, though I admit that to either of you the suggestion amounts to a treason of sorts.
Treason, because it is an absolute fundamental breach of the rigid psychological wall Rubert has built. The idea of inviting the enemy, the specter of authority, into the safety and sanctity of one's own home is a total violation of his defensive posture.
It feels like giving the mother access to the gas jets.
Exactly.
And the session notes the extreme difficulty of getting this simple piece of advice through the channel. The phrase is so loaded, one simple, well-meant invitation might be in order, and this was hell to get through. With Rubert's blocks.
Hell to get through.
The source even had the channel end the sentence most vigorously, shaking a finger and voicing the words forcefully, just to overcome the internal resistance. That level of difficulty, it just underscores how profoundly rooted the fear was.
So why is this act of treasonous kindness, this single olive branch, so strategically necessary?
It serves two strategic purposes. First, for Joseph, who takes the notes and often bears the brunt of Rubert's tirades about the director, it allows Joseph to size him up in a neutral, non-professional context. He can see the man as a person, not a position.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, and far more vital for Rubert, it forces him to encounter the director when he is not in a position of authority that he's felt honor-bound to uphold.
Take the man out of the gallery, out of the fence of details, and he's just a person, potentially awkward, possibly nice, but stripped of the authoritative uniform.
Exactly. The conditioned reflex is tied to the uniform, the role, the context. Remove the context, and the terror of the crippled mother turning on the gas jets loses its immediate psychological mooring. That single shift in perception, seeing the man as human, can dissolve decades of conditioning faster than months of internal agonizing.
So it's an exercise in seeing reality.
Not projection.
That is the crucial takeaway for us. Sometimes the only way to diffuse a complex rivalry rooted in deep-seated fear is through a simple yet profoundly difficult human gesture that takes place outside the established battleground. Before wrapping up, the session reviews a final list of ongoing wellness strategies, shifting back to the lifestyle elements that serve as the foundation for all this intense psychological work.
The focus remains on self-care as a non-negotiable condition for maximizing work output. A key piece of advice relates to breaks. Rubert has a tendency to throw himself too wholly into his work, risking complete exhaustion and emotional engulfment.
And the source specifically recommends whole days away, stating this is excellent and well worth any inconvenience it might cause. The inconvenience is the cost of detaching from the obsessive loop of work and worry.
The ability to intentionally disengage is a sign of mastery. The short, sharp break provides perspective and prevents that emotional engulfment. If you never take a whole day away, your identity becomes entirely fused with your professional life, magnifying the impact of every rejection slip or minor conflict.
And tying back to the initial physical training, there is a specific positive health prediction tied to the psychological work. The back exercises and the subsequent calmness will hasten the time when Rubert is able to dispense with a dependence upon cigarettes.
This is a beautiful statement about holistic healing. The cigarette fulfills an emotional need, the need for a brief moment of anxiety reduction, a ritualized pause, or a coping mechanism for the constant panic reflex.
Right.
If the panic reflex is actively being conditioned out of the system by the back exercises and mental discipline, the emotional need for the dependency just diminishes automatically. The physical habit becomes unnecessary once the psychological mechanism that required it is neutralized.
There's also a vacation prescription, offering a specific location for psychic refreshment, indicating that environmental factors matter greatly to creative output.
Yes. A definite and tangible benefit would be derived from a vacation, specifically traveling near or to a large body of water, most preferably the ocean. This is connected to the success of a previous trip to a glen, indicating that these natural environments are excellent psychic refreshers and highly beneficial for the work they do on the sessions.
Get to the beach.
Basically,
Yeah.
the material reinforces that surrounding yourself with natural beauty and vastness is part of the necessary discipline to counteract the claustrophobia of personal neuroses.
Okay, now for the element that always keeps us guessing, the mystery of the house preparation. There is a recurring, unexplained bit of advice here that hints at much larger, subtle forces at play.
This is where the metaphysical antennae really go up, because we glimpse the subtle protective maneuvering happening just outside the frame of their conscious awareness. The material states, "I have been preparing your house for you. Do not forget my suggestion that you air out the cellar."
Which is an extraordinary juxtaposition. High-level protection combined with very basic, prosaic home maintenance.
Exactly. And Joseph, the astute note-taker, recognizes this as a recurring theme and immediately asks for clarification. How have you been preparing the house? What is the hidden danger lurking in the cellar?
And what does he get?
And all Joseph gets for his pains is a smile from the channel and a perfectly vague reply that stops all inquiry. "In my own way. I will not go into that at this time, as it involves matters which we have not discussed."
That's the classic channeling cliffhanger, isn't it? A massive, dramatic hint dropped, followed by the firm wall of access denied. It implies a necessary, subtle intervention that has to remain beneath the surface for their safety or continued development.
It does. But it reminds us that while we focus on the practical human drama of the spelling rebellion, this deep dive is part of a much larger process of metaphysical guidance. It underscores the profound value of the sometimes prosaic-sounding advice.
Like air out the cellar or do your back exercises. Why is this simple, seemingly mundane advice given such weight?
Because by heeding this advice, by making these small, simple adjustments in the physical and behavioral realm, they have already avoided many unfortunate possible circumstances. The small disciplines prevent the large crises.
Wow.
The seemingly unimportant acts of intentional focus and maintenance are the foundation for successfully channeling enormous creative and psychic energy. It's about being guided to use possibility in their current locality to avoid problems they don't even know exist.
It brings everything full circle. The back exercises aren't just about feeling better in the moment. They are an active defense, both psychological and potentially existential, against potential future problems. So what does this intensely personal session from 1964 mean for you, the listener, as you navigate the modern office, passive-aggressive emails, or the constant pressure of professional validation?
The core lesson remains unchanged. The professional drama that feels so immediate and pressing, whether it's a difficult colleague, a micromanaging boss, or a fight over a project's timeline, is rarely about the objective facts.
Right.
It is almost always a manifestation of your deepest, oldest psychological issues. The fear of authority, the bruised ego from lack of validation, the porcupine reflex. These are the forces causing the conflict, not the director's actual spelling fetish.
And the solution isn't to win the argument, it's to dismantle the reflex. The foundation for professional peace and external success lies in inner work. Applying simple, non-negotiable discipline, like those back exercises and scheduled quietude, to train the system to default to calmness. That inner stability automatically releases the energy trapped in fear and aggression.
And this includes challenging yourself to make those difficult human adjustments. Holding back the sarcasm, stopping the defensiveness, and having the psychological courage to extend that single difficult olive branch, that treasonous invitation, is often the most powerful and transformative strategic move you can make.
It changes everything.
It forces you and your supposed antagonist to step outside the conditioned roles and see each other simply as people, neutralizing the trauma proxy instantly.
We've covered everything from crippled mothers threatening gas jets to the defiant artistic misspelling of excellent ideas, all leading to one central realization about self-mastery. Your emotional history is directing your present work life.
So if psychological tension, rooted in old trauma, automatically drains the energy needed for your core creative work and even impacts your physical health, impairing your body and fostering chemical dependence, what then is the true staggering cost of holding on to that defensiveness? And conversely, how quickly could that simple daily quietude, like the focus required by those back exercises, release those torrents of energy back into constructive use, maximizing your abilities and deepening the import of your life's work? That is the question we leave you to contemplate.
A profound and critical note to end on. If you want to dive deeper into this fascinating material and explore the larger context of this guidance, this deep dive analyzed Session 74 of the Early Sessions Book 2 of the Seth Material, channeled by Jane Roberts and published by New Awareness Network.
We highly encourage you to explore the source material and continue your journey of understanding and self-mastery. You can find more information and the books at sethcenter.com/early sessions.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. Until next time, keep training that concentration and watch out for those porcupine quills.